Thank you so much for coming. My name is Lauren Kosrow. My full-time job here is I'm a librarian, so you can find me over in the e-building in the library most of the time. But at the beginning of this academic year in the fall, I stepped into the role of chair of our academic assessment committee. So that's kind of the hat that I will be putting on as I'm doing the presentation for you guys today. So I'd love to do just a quick introduction. If you can do your name, where you teach, and then if you also can share a little bit about maybe like a scale of 1 to 5 of how comfortable you are with the topic of assessment. So like completely clueless, have never done it before, or to, I've engaged in it. We just have a little bit of a pulse of where you guys are at would be really helpful for me as I share content with you guys today. So you want to go ahead and take a thought?
Sure. My name is Caitlin. I teach math. I would say kind of in the middle of assessment, like usually more of the traditional forms of assessment, tests and quizzes, but I'm really branched out, so that's what I wanted to learn about here.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. What about you?
I'm Denise. I'm from the adult education department of campus. I currently do not teach, but I would be useful to come and learn more about assessments.
Assessment touches all of us, so it's great. Thanks for coming.
My name is John Morey. I teach in CIS, and with my first graduate degree is in psychometrics, so I'm fairly, I went to something called SPSS in computers. So I am very quite familiar with different types of assessment, both qualitative and quantitative. However, it's a moving target, and I'm always interested in seeing what are the either new things or things I may have forgotten or other types of.
You'll probably teach me a couple things.
Well, I think we all can teach each other quite a bit.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming, Doug.
I'm Joydeep. I teach biology, and I am moderately familiar.
Okay. Great, awesome. So this is really geared, or my presentation today is really geared as like an assessment 101. So if there are any points that I shared today that you want to know more about, or have like a longer discussion, or dive into any of those points, please feel free. Stop. We can have some conversations, ask questions. This is a flexible format. The more we can have a conversation and dialogue about these topics, the better. I'm also suffering from a little bit of a cold, so if I just stand up here and talk for 45 minutes, my voice is going to be a little worse for the wear. So please jump in, ask questions. Please, I invite you to bring your own insight, your own perspective to some of these topics as well. All right? So like any good assessment practitioner, I have some outcomes for our time together today. And so what I would really, at the end of this session, what I hope to accomplish is for all of us collectively to be able to, describe why higher education institutions engage in assessment practices. Hi, how are you? Summarize how to use direct and indirect methods of assessment to gather evidence of student learning, and then also to discuss how to use assessment practices to improve student learning. So hopefully, as higher education professionals, both faculty and staff, that these topics aren't necessarily new, but it's maybe kind of diving in and engaging them at a different level. So the first kind of section that I wanted to chat about with you today is this idea of what is assessment. It sounds like we all have a little bit of a baseline knowledge, so we'll just go through this content, and again, feel free to ask questions and jump in with your own experiences in the classroom and otherwise. So what is assessment? I really like Linda Sutsky's definition here, and one of her works talks about assessment is a process that identifies what we want students to learn, provides them with good opportunities to learn those things, and then we assess whether or not they have learned those things, right? So as this can happen at many different levels within a higher education institution. We're going to talk about some of those levels in just a few minutes. But really, when you break it down, all of these processes are covering that, right? What do we want students to learn? We're giving them opportunities to learn those things, and then we're assessing whether or not they have learned those things. So really, it's this ongoing process, right, of establishing clear, measurable, expected student learning outcomes, ensuring that students have sufficient opportunities to achieve those outcomes. So whether that's in a course, right, giving them multiple learning activities within a course, whether that's in your program where you teach, or whether that is our general education outcomes as part of their experience of being a student here at Triton College. Systematically gathering analyzing and interpreting evidence to determine how well student learning matches our expectations. We're not going to dive, or at least I have not prepared slides that dive really deep into this process of systematically gathering, analyzing, interpreting evidence. I'm more than happy to engage in those conversations. And I can speak a little bit to, we're in a process of reorganizing some of our assessment procedures and practices here at Triton. And so I'm happy, and I can absolutely speak to some of the ways that we are building that larger structure and kind of redoing some of our assessment processes that allow us to more systematically gather this evidence. So if you have questions about that moving forward, we can definitely have that conversation. But really, the emphasis is on using the resulting information, using that data that we gather to understand and improve student learning. So really, assessment is about improvement of student learning, right? The teaching and learning experience that students encounter while they're here at Triton College. And so I'm sure if you have any experience with assessment, you've seen some form of this graphic, right? So this image comes in a variety of different colors, shapes, sizes, but really what it's attempting to give you a visualization of is what we call the assessment cycle. So the different pieces are first identifying our desired outcomes, and again, that can be both in the classroom, in co-curricular, that can be at the course level, the program level, the general education level. They all share similar characteristics of identifying what we want students to learn, so identifying those desired outcomes. Then we assess those outcomes, and again, that can look differently, or can look different in different forms, but really it is that process of collecting that evidence. So once we collect evidence of student learning, then we interpret that evidence, and we make plans based on that evidence. So we look at the data we collected. We say, are students meeting our intended benchmark, right? Are they meeting our expectations for learning in the classroom? And we can make decisions based on that. Data is not good or bad, right? You get data back, it's a number, right? Is that number meeting your expectations? If not, then what are the changes you can make that will hopefully lead to improvement in student learning, right? If changes our students are meeting expectations, maybe that's a great time to raise your benchmark, right? Raise your target, excuse me. Or then you know that you're doing a really great job in that area, providing students with opportunities to learn, and you can move on and assess other content areas. Then implementing those changes, right? So again, it's not improvement right away, right? You don't make a change and call that improvement, right? You make a change to the classroom, your teaching style, right? The experience for learning. But it's not a change or it's not an improvement until it's been shown to actually improve student learning. So we make changes, but then we have to start the cycle over again, reassess to see if those changes actually led to improvement in student learning. Any questions on that piece? Yeah?
Well, how do you feel about like levels? The way I approach my assessments are that I.
Where do you teach? What area do you teach again?
History.
History. Okay.
So I am not a fan of just memorization, names, dates, and facts. I mean, I know that information is not going to be seen as useful by the students, and they're going to memorize it and then just kind of dump it all out. Mm-hmm. But I do give them the opportunity at least to, like, I have 3 different levels the way I look at it of assessment. And that first level is I want them to read the textbook so they have some knowledge coming in. I put that at a low risk. So I have multiple choice, and I do it through Blackboard, and those grades get dumped into Blackboard, and I allow them a certain amount of time, and I allow them to take it as many times as they want. I don't care. But to me, that's about 20% of the grade that they really, really control. Like, they should do really, really well on it. Then I have other things that are in class, and the essays, the more critical thinking, that I know is a lot more important to my class and the students. But I have that as like, level 3. So I kind of have built-in layers like a cake that says I'm going to stagger this. So I'm not going to I don't think that everybody's a great writer or a critical thinker. So if that's all I'm doing, I'm going to kill my students, I think. I think that would be great if they had that skill right up front. but I don't think that that's realistic in my 10 years that I've been doing this. It just hasn't, it's never worked out. So I don't know what your thought is on that. If that's like a good approach, or you're thinking maybe you should just get rid of the low-hanging fruit with the quizzes and just move on to something that's really critical. Because in my mind, I don't think that that's that important that they know all that, but I want to give them opportunities to do well, and some people do well through multiple choice. And I also want them to read the book, and if I don't assign something out of that book, I basically think that I should not even tell them that they need a book, because they're not going to use it, which some teachers do, and really frustrate students.
Yeah, I think there's a couple moving pieces there, right? And so I think any questions around, what a designing assessment, right? What students should learn. I think this all we're going to talk about outcomes in a few moments, but it really depends on your student learning outcomes. And if you're talking about a course level, right? In this course, at the end of this course, what should students know or be able to do as a result? And so I think when you have those outcomes in mind, that really helps shape the assessment, a little bit of that backwards design for you to say, these are the 5 to 7 course outcomes. This is what they have to know upon leaving this class.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, kind of scaffolding those experiences to lead to the point at the end of the class. Maybe it's your final exam, maybe it's a final paper, portfolio, whatever that might be, that they should be able to demonstrate these, 4 to 7, 5 to 7 outcomes as a result of your course. So with any assessment, I think it's really looking at those outcomes in mind and then planning backwards. Because you're right, there's so much going on in a 16-week course, but really having your outcomes help shape that. I think that's great. So yeah, we're going to touch on a few of the things that you spoke about there, but I think that would be my first kind of approach at answering that. Any other questions? Okay, so then another I guess kind of framing point here is the difference between doing assessment and then using assessment data. So I really like this quote again. Assessment by itself does not improve teaching and learning, right? Just the act of assessment, right? Just the act of giving tests or giving quizzes, does not necessarily improve teaching and learning. It's how faculty, staff, institutional leaders use it that leads to an improvement in teaching and learning. Okay, so that's really where a lot of our focus is going to be on today, is using that assessment data. So this tends to be when I engage with faculties in conversation about assessment, there tends to be a little, I just want to move through this quickly, but a little bit of not necessarily confusion, but there really isn't a complete standard across higher education for the terminology around goals, objectives, and outcomes. So some institutions will use some of these interchangeably. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit, as we've talked about making our assessment processes more systematic, more unified across campus. This is one of the things that we're hoping to achieve, is a little bit more standard terminology, standard vocabulary around assessment. So I just wanted to quickly cover how we at Triton College talk about goals, objectives, and outcomes, just because, again, they can be sometimes interchanged in different spaces within higher education. So goals, when we talk about goals are broad statements of student competence. So for example, if you think about your course that you teach, a broad goal for your course, maybe students will be confident in critical thinking and analysis, right? A broad goal. You might have maybe 2 or 3 of these for your course. And also, I would say that this could be the same for a program, right? A broad goal for a program. Maybe it's that, students will be competent medical providers, right? Depending on the program of the courses. Now, objectives are what a faculty member will cover in a course. So these are that middle layer. So less broad than goals, more broad than outcomes. And so example, students will gain an understanding of the historical origins of art history. So this is really more about like what you're going to cover in class, right? Students will read and analyze seminal works in 20th century literature, right? So some of the objectives for class. Again, a few of these for your course. Now, when it comes to student learning outcomes, these are really specific, right? So student learning outcomes are what students will know or be able to do upon completion of a course or a program. So these should be meaningful, right? So you can cover 16 weeks of content, but what are maybe the 5 to 7 outcomes as a result of your course that students should know or be able to do. So those really meaningful statements, manageable, and also, and really important, measurable. So that's the difference between, let's say, for example, like a goal, right? Students will be critical thinkers, right? That's really hard to specifically measure. When we put it in the statement of an outcome, it becomes much more manageable to measure, to document and collect evidence. So for an example, when given a case study, students will be able to apply principles of evidence-based medicine to determine clinical diagnosis. We can start to see potentially what an assignment might look like, what an exam, what a test could look like, and where a faculty member would be able to determine if students have this skill or not. Does that make sense? So maybe you would see, given a case study, right? Then maybe there's a rubric to grade it, right? So we can start to see the pieces that would come together, what it would look like to document whether your students are able to do or have this competency as a result of your course or your program. Okay, so it's just a little bit to clarify the vocabulary. And when we're talking about, for assessment purposes, we're really talking about student learning outcomes. And again, those can be, we're going to talk about in just a moment, at the course level, so for your specific course. They could be at the program level, right? So as a result of a degree program or certificate program, what they should know and be able to do. Or we can talk about it in terms of our general education outcomes. So we're going to take a look at that in just a minute. Now, some characteristics of student learning outcomes. Really effective outcomes describe what students should be able to demonstrate, represent, or produce upon completion of a course or program and study. So really at the heart of it is like, this is what we want our students to learn, right? So this is deeply about our curriculum, about our courses, about our programs. What are students learning as a result of interacting us, being in our classrooms, right? Being in our Blackboard shells, right? Spending time with us for 16 weeks. This is what they should be able to do. So outcomes really rely on active verbs that identify what students should be able to demonstrate, represent, or produce. Often they incorporate or adapt professional organization outcome statements when they exist. So this is really heavily in our career and technical education programs, right? The professional organizations that put out some of these competencies, but is becoming more and more a part of the liberal arts as well. And can be quantitatively or qualitatively assessed during a student's educational studies. So just to talk a little bit about creating some of those measurable outcomes, right? When we think about what we want students to learn, some of the statements that are harder to measure, words like appreciate, understand, become familiar with. Because where's the threshold, right? Where do you cut off this student understands this or not, right? When you talk about being able to measure that, document evidence, though that becomes harder to do. Or you say they will be able to learn something, right? How do we measure that? Where's that threshold when we say students have been able to learn this? Now, statements that are a little bit easier to measure, students will be able to explain how the science of exercise affects stress, right? We can see that in maybe like a short answer in a paper, a presentation, right? We can start to see where we can collect evidence of this learning. Design a research study. Again, we can see what that can look like. Demonstrate the use of correct grammar. Analyze arguments about racial discrimination. So some of these more specific, measurable, action, verb-oriented outcomes, we can really start to see what would look like to see evidence of students learning and being able to do that. Any questions on this piece? Okay. So again, just an emphasis of using those action verbs, right? Behavior that can be measured and observed. The verbs that are really unclear or can be unobservable, a little bit more unmeasurable. And then this idea of levels of learning. And I think that you brought this up a little bit as well, right? The levels of learning from superficial, low, right? I can regurgitate it because I just crammed for it last night, to high, right? Deep understanding. And I think you're putting out that great of like, a quick quiz, multiple choice, can you identify? That's some of those lower levels of learning, or maybe by the end of class, you want them to be able to synthesize or analyze something, right? So when you scaffold those learning experiences, you are able to think about what are those higher level of learning that I want them to be able to do as a result of this course. But also when we think about our programs, right? Not all of us are responsible in one course for teaching the entire program content, right? So how do courses stack and build on each other? And how do we as a faculty body, track how students are learning and progressing in their knowledge for over the course of 2 years? And then for those who decide to transfer, right, that they are building upon those skills when they leave here at Triton. So I'm going to break there for a second. Any questions or comments on any of the content I've covered so far? Okay. So let's dig into a little bit of some of the types of assessments. So again, I talked about those levels, right? These concepts of outcomes, identifying the outcomes, writing measurable outcomes, those are really applicable across course, program, or general education outcomes. We'll start broad. Our general education outcomes. So general education outcomes, we actually just revised our general education outcomes at the end of the fall semester. So the assessment committee, my committee, really got some faculty input, faculty buy-in. We had conversations both here in the CT and both larger audiences, and we were able to revise our general education outcomes. We had 9. We revised them down to 5. And so moving forward in our assessment processes, every year we'll be assessing a general education outcome. So these are our overarching outcomes that, again, are addressed repeatedly in multiple courses rather than a single course. I'm going to show you our gen ed outcomes, but one of them is critical thinking, right? That was one of our past ones. We revised down to 5, kept critical thinking as one of them. Just one of us, right, is responsible for making our students critical thinkers, right? That is something that students engage across the curriculum, right, as a result of being a student here. So really, that responsibility to teach but also assess is shared between academic faculty, but also student affairs staff as well as they engage with workshops and other programs here on campus. This is really part about being a student here at Triton, not just in one of our courses or classes. And so our general education outcomes, again, are revised ones. You can see here, I won't read them all to you. They're on our website now. Critical thinking, right? Having students become critical thinkers. Communicators, great communicators, both written and orally. Be proficient in information literacy, quantitative literacy, and then also global learning. So talking about exploring complex global challenges from diverse perspectives. So these are our 5 general education outcomes. And again, we're going to be doing more of a rollout in terms of our new assessment processes as we continue to build them. Our entire kind of new assessment structure will be rolling out over the summer and into the fall. But I encourage you, as you hear or receive information from your department chairs, coordinators, deans, on how we're going to start engaging 1 per year. So this next year, I believe we're going to kick it off with critical thinking, right? But looking at ways that how do we assess, right? Whether our students are meeting the benchmark, meeting our standard for becoming critical thinkers. So across the college, how do we as a faculty body build that into our curriculum, right? And then also how do we assess how our students are doing? So those are going to be conversations that we are going to be diving into a little bit deeper this next coming year. Now, program level assessment measures the knowledge, skills, attitudes, behaviors, or values students should be able to demonstrate the end of a program of study. So this is, again, a degree or a certificate program here at Triton. And outcomes are broader than those of its courses, right? So it's not just stacking all the course outcomes, and that's what it should be at the end. It's really saying, looking at the curriculum after 2 years, what should students know or be able to do? And so part of our work in the assessment committee this past semester, the fall semester, was really ensuring that all programs had program level outcomes. So to date, that was not always the case. Got our friends in CT or career and technical education typically been a little bit more ahead of us because of specialized accreditation. And so a lot of those programs did have program level outcomes, but not all degree or certificate programs on campus did. That's no longer the case. So as of now, all programs have program level outcomes. So that experience was really faculty engaging in conversations and really thinking, some of us for the first time, what do we want students to know and be able to do as a result of this program? And so now all program level outcomes are listed on a curriculum proposal page, which is part of our curriculum process. Currently, they're housed in the curriculum office, which is just down the hallway here. But rolling out pretty soon, they'll be printed in the catalog. So in the catalog, you'll be able to see the program level outcomes. More importantly, students will be able to see the program level outcomes. And then they're also, we're going to be working on sharing them in some of our internal documentation as well. So pretty soon those will be a little bit more public, more available, and I think it's really important for students to be able to say, you know, as a result of engaging in this program, right, what will I be able to do, right, those statements. And then course level assessment, which I think is probably what we're all the most familiar with. So this is typically based on tests and assignments, right, that contribute to the grading process. This is really measuring how well students as a whole are achieving the course outcomes. So looking at the students in your classroom, the different sections of a course, saying collectively how are students doing in reaching these outcomes. And so all of Triton's course outcomes, all courses have course outcomes, right? So when you're teaching a course, all courses have course outcomes. They're typically listed on the course syllabus, and they're definitely listed on the course outline, which is again found on the curriculum portal page within the Triton portal. So all courses have those course outcomes, and as you are looking, right, as you're teaching those courses, saying how do I ensure that students are meeting, right, these course outcomes, and that should be the case across sections of that course, right? So all instructors, all faculty are teaching to the same outcomes, and regardless of which section students are placed in, should all be meeting those course outcomes at the end of that instruction period. All right, so let's talk a little bit, right, about how we actually start to kind of engage in assessing those student learning outcomes. So that's more of the structural piece. This is talking a little bit more about actually assessing them. So this is one of the first questions that typically get from faculty, right? Like, isn't grading my assessment, right? I grade, right? Like grade stuff, isn't that my assessment? And so my answer is always yes and no. It kind of depends on how you do it, right? So grades alone, if you're talking about grading the course, right? So many of my class or students got an A, somebody got a B, somebody C. You know, this half the ones that got A and B definitely learned, and C, you know, learned. The ones that got D's and F's did not, right? So that's typically how we think about it. But grades alone do not provide meaningful information on exactly what students have and have not learned. For example, an A in the course, right, or a C in the course doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what students learned in that course or did not. And then also, grading and assessment criteria may differ. For example, a student who got a B in the course, who has points attached to attendance in here? Are any points for showing up to class or having any kind of attendance? Quizzes that are given in class?
Is participation included in that?
Not as some faculty lump them together, some don't. So attendance or participation.
We're just showing up doesn't do it, because you have to attend
and participate, and then there's points attached to that. Yeah. Some around late assignments. For example, a student could have showed they learned everything on assignment, but if they turn it in a week late, you may dock points for that, right? So the points aren't necessarily represented of the actual learning that occurred. Does that make sense, those differences, right? So students may have the points bumped because of participation and attendance. Late assignment, they could show that they learned everything, but again, because of course expectations, right, we dock that grade. That grade doesn't necessarily represent the actual learning that occurred. But grading and assessment can work together to provide data. And so looking at maybe specific, for example, a lot of our instructors do final exams, right? You want to make sure that students are able to demonstrate knowledge at the end of the course. Looking at specific final exam questions rather than maybe the whole grade as a whole, but saying, I really want to know how they did on this particular topic or this particular outcome from my course. Were they able to show me that they learned this? Maybe looking at a specific essay prompt or a specific set of multiple choice questions, those can work together. You can give them a grade for the entire test, but then your assessment could be zoning in on maybe those 5 questions that really help you determine, did students actually learn this particular outcome, this piece of content? Does that make sense? Okay. Also, rubrics are beautiful for this, right? So developing a rubric where you can grade the entire paper, let's say, or presentation, but there could be a line on the rubric that is really towards that specific outcome, right? And so there could be, for the presentation, there could be, delivery, right, slides, but then there could be a bar on the rubric that is really getting at a particular content area. So you can have those two work together. Oftentimes, I hear a little bit of resistance from faculty because they think that assessment's just an add-on, right? Something else you have to add on to maybe grading or another assignment you have to give in your class. And really, it should be embedded in what you're already doing. We already collect so much data on what students are doing in our classroom, right? It sounds like we're, it's definitely part of the faculty experience. So it's just kind of aligning these things and then also collecting data in a meaningful way. But it definitely should not be something that's added on. It should be deeply embedded in the work that you're already doing. So just to talk a little bit about different ways to collect data. So really, what we're talking about assessing student learning, oftentimes we're using these direct measures. So direct measures require students to actually demonstrate their knowledge and skills, and this really evaluates tangible, visible evidence of what students have and have not learned. And again, this is a result of a course, a program, activity. So we have things like tests, essays, presentations, assignments, portfolios, licensure exams, right? Some of the health professions are great for these. And then maybe there's something like a capstone experience. We don't have this as much in a two-year environment, but something like this as well. Where more indirect measures captures students' perception of their knowledge and skills. And so really these can work together to provide a more holistic evaluation of the student's experience. But this really helps provide information about how and why learning is occurring. So something like a self-assessment, peer feedback, and of course evaluations, surveys, right? Things like that are more indirect ways of assessment. You can absolutely collect multiple forms of this to help inform what's going on in your classroom and the student learning that's happening. So when we think about getting started with assessment, one of the things that I wanted to emphasize again is thinking about what's already in place. So I would love to hear, I'm going to kind of read these questions, but I'll hear from you guys of what assignments, projects, or exam questions are you currently using to assess student learning? And then how do these collect evidence of student learning, whether that's in your course or in your program, or even the general education outcomes slide that I showed you a few minutes earlier. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about what's already happening in your classroom.
It varies a lot between classes.
Absolutely.
The lower level classes tend to be more of the memorization and reading a bunch of terms. Computer information systems is somewhat like when someone takes like a nursing course or something else like that. Initially, you have to learn all these like biomedical terms. And we have a lot of acronyms and things like that. And then we have them do some rather rudimentary things. But I look for, I believe that self-efficacy is incredibly important in terms of whether someone continues. So I try to create situations where they're going to have little mini successes, often just spitting things back. Later in even those courses, I start asking them more tool type things and stuff. You have to know with computer things. You have to know about fixing computers and networks, but you also are dealing with human beings who are using those computers and networks. Often who will not tell you or even not know what they have done, or maybe they didn't do it, just happened according to them. And so those kind of subtleties tend to be like, you try to get to know the students as people early on, and then have them do things that are not that difficult things to do so they're succeeding. And then you try to get them talking about what if you think something's clicking, and you get them talking about that, and you give them things you're working towards some type of synthesis. You can give more fuzzy questions. By the time we get to the advanced courses, like cybersecurity and things like that, we give them scenarios and things like, this is what's going on, and you walked in, and this is this is what you know.
Mhm.
Imagine you might say, this I know this would never happen. Ransomware has just hit your campus. You know, how would you even start? What's an incident response? Or you've read about this. What's your plan?
Mhm. Is that kind of analysis, do you know, is that built into your course outcomes? Like students have to be able to do that as a result of those higher level courses?
It's weird because of the professional examinations that people for. We kind of have to be kind of a dual-headed hydra because you've got the folks that are only going for a certificate, or even less. Some folks are just trying to get a certificate and get back in the job. They might be, you know, they're adults. They've got mortgages. They got WIA funds. They have 6 months to get the certificate and go back to and get a job.
Sure.
That's what ways to be. That's what I understand. But on the other hand, I'm also, we try to prepare people, the students that are going to move on for a bachelor's or master's or whatever, or more advanced certifications. They're the ones that you have to take what you kind of drilled into their head or they've worked through in the labs, and then say, okay, now we have to synthesize this information because when you get to the next level, it's going to be less cut and dry, the questions that are asked. And so you need to understand frameworks for how you even approach problems. And, you know, so it just varies so much. I mean, like, and I'll just try to leave with this. When people go to security, they typically go into it because they really like tinkering with stuff and the tagging and, you know, there's a red team and a blue team, you know, it's really fun stuff if you like to tech. But the real security administrator doesn't do that stuff. What real security administrators do is they do a lot of procedures, they do trainings, they're working with HR, they're trying to get people to not click that link. Don't pick up that USB drive you found in the parking lot and stick it into the computer. You know, and those are kind of things that if you understand the framework of like, if you understand the framework that I have the human side of it, when I ask them to write, give me an example, you have to give prescribed behaviors. What do I expect you to do? You know, every job, you know, on this job, here's where things are, and here's what you do. And then I give them proscribed behaviors. So those have to be an acceptable use policy. And then you have to explain it to them because nobody wants to read it. I mean, which of us reads like a license agreement, you know, when you're downloading something? It's like, okay. You know, so, but when anyway, so that type of thinking, you have to prepare them to say, okay, over half, if not 75% of most of what you're doing in IT, unless you're a hardcore programmer, is people.
Yeah, so I'm curious, how do you assess that in your class? Like, as a result of which of your courses, right, do you have them do papers, presentations? Like, how do you know they have that?
We have our capstone,
Yeah.
and then we have, what I do is I'll have them, after we work on some things in the semester, I'll present them with, and often different questions for different groups, because you might have, you get people to create some groups and say, okay, we need to know more about such and such a topic, but we don't have time for all of us to go through all those different things, so I'm going to ask your team to write up something about this particular topic. I'm going to want you to present it back to people. You know what I mean? So you can pick who the other, and I'm not going to grade them if they say a lot and stuff like that. I don't care.
So it's like presentations.
Presentations and things they've written up, and they expect them to hand those, to give those to me, so I can steal the knowledge and use it the next time.
But I mean, that'd be interesting, right?
It's really evolving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the interesting thing is certain fields and poli-sci, I mean, there's a number of fields that are moving faster than other fields. So I mean, like human anatomy, you know, if you really memorized it, chances are, I don't know if it's changing a lot. But what we do is changing all the time, so we have to include current events and things like that. So it's really, I mean, like this is really a bummer, what just happened on this campus.
Make it a
But it
case
gave us,
study.
but it gave us a lot to talk about.
Yeah, no, I think it's great,
So-
right? So like, as we're talking about this, right, so it's like, for that more human side, that I thought was really interesting they're pulling out, right? Identifying the assignments, the projects, right, the questions that you can use, right, to show, like, how am I developing that side of my students, right? Not just the
Yeah.
content side, but the ability to work with people, to communicate effectively, right? And then how are you collecting evidence of that, right? So
Yeah.
if it's not just, 100 on your presentation, but how are you, is it like a rubric, right? How are you grading?
I should
Yes,
more
they
rubrics.
have that human side, right?
Would-
They've
would you
shown
say-
that they can interact
Yeah,
with
yeah.
people.
Well, there are certainly, especially on the technical support side and on the team building side, you
Mhm.
can do role plays. You could be
Absolutely.
the difficult client.
Yep.
You could do, they do the
Yep.
same type of thing.
Right. How are we
I got a friend
collecting
who's he does almost like, he's an actor for like different medical schools. He gets told,
Yeah,
hey,
you're this person
I've got
today.
all these different things, and sometimes you're a difficult client,
Right,
sometimes you're very easy.
right.
And,
But just to
it's-
play off, right, that stereotype a little bit, right, what if you're doing these role plays and all your students are doing, right, they can totally explain what's going on, but I'm playing the person that, clicked on the phishing email and it's over my head, right? So if your students are really low on that side,
Yeah.
what the assessment cycle is looking at is, okay, great, the number's not bad, right?
Hmm.
If you come back and 20% of your students, right, are hitting the benchmark, the number itself is not bad, but it's saying, what is the target? Where would I like for it to be? And then what are the learning experiences or opportunities that I can build into my curriculum, whether it's this course or whether it's other courses in the program. Maybe it's getting together with faculty and saying, hey, like, they're graduating, they're leaving us knowing the content knowledge and not really being able to talk about it with other people. So what are the learning experiences we can build within our curriculum to build that knowledge and skill set? So when students leave our campus, whether it's for the certificate or the degree program, they are able to talk with non-IT people and explain and have more practice, right? All that series of learning experiences within the curriculum that allow them to develop that skill. So that is part of that assessment cycle, right? What do we want students to learn? How are we giving them the opportunity to learn it within our curriculum? And how do we know that they have learned it, right? So that was a great one. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? What do you have in place right now? What assignments and exams are you currently using? How do you know that students are learning what they should be learning in your classroom? What are those outcomes?
So in our department, I work with the ESL and DB students, and I know that, of course, they have writing assignments and projects and so forth in the
Yeah.
midterm semesters, midterm tests. But before they are placed in the level that they belong in, they are pre-assessed, and then they're, assessed at the end. So I know that that's what we're using to kind of see if they've had a level gain or learned something in order to move on to the next level.
Yeah. Is that a standardized test, you know? It is. Yep. So standardized test, right? It's normed. It's across the curriculum, right? It's across the board. It's probably some either kind of national, right, or state test. And so, are they passing these competencies, right? Very similar to something like an NCLEX or a state exam that for some of your accreditation or credentialing. Absolutely. And then when you get those test results back, right? That's a great opportunity to say, hey, our students are systematically, right? It's not about one individual student, but across, right? We're a little low on this one. Where can we go back to our classroom and build in those experiences so students have an opportunity to learn that particular outcome, skill, or ability, right? So having a system, I think, for your department, I'm sure Jacqueline's amazing. I'm sure she's doing that, right? But taking those scores every semester and saying, where can we be building our students up? Where can we be making them more proficient in these areas? What is our part in that? Right? Any other comments or stories to share?
I just want to share, I want to share a cultural level on the school has created some challenges. I think I told you about this before. It created some real monumental challenges for themselves by trying to run everything with part-time people. And because we're not rewarded in our little BF world, we're not rewarded. I know we get a few farthings for attending these, and I do appreciate those are good. But in reality, we're only rewarded, aside from intrinsic, for going standing in front of the folks and teaching and providing grades, and teaching. And so we have. It's very rare there is a meeting. In many of these departments, in fact, I know my department only had one person up until this past year. And the rest of were all part-time people. And I think I have 0 conversations with other part-time people about this. Now I think about it, and I appreciate it. But I think that if this school would like to have more of these types of conversations, they should hire people full-time, and they should actually reward them for these behaviors. And you'd be amazed how much the propensity of us to do these behaviors would be if we get rewards. They don't have to be a lot. We're not like Goldman Sachs people, but we would like to be able to make a mortgage. So, I think as long as they want to try to do this for people paying $15,000, $20,000 a year, I think they're sorely mistaken that they're going to get this level of consistency.
I think there are definitely, that's struggles that across higher education, right? As the ratio of part-time to full-time.
This is a recent thing. This is like the, late 80s, 90s on. This is not, doesn't have to be this way.
Right, there's higher education institutions across the board are struggling with exactly the issue that you're talking about. Did you have anything that you wanted to add on this one?
I've done something new in the last year or two, and so my belief is that students learn, not every student learns the same. So to reward them, I do what I call lecture assignments, and those lecture assignments are really based on creativity. So I want them to think outside the box and tell me what they've learned in different ways, in different methods. So I've had students that actually write lyrics to a song and perform the song, and it's to history, and they're playing it and stuff. So they, they're musicians, and they're really good at it. And I'm like, that's your talent. Why don't you use that? Because I didn't start in education. I started in business, and I spent 10 years in that industry, and I thought the way I moved up was thinking outside the box. So I want my students to take that, because that's what they're really going to value. They're not going to value all the content that I give them, but if they can do something a little bit different in a creative way, a 60 minutes episode of interviewing historical figures, and then taping it, that's pretty cool. I mean, those things, I like that as well, because I'm like, wow, I didn't think of that. That's a great idea.
Absolutely. And that's why I think one of the reasons why rubrics are so cool is because if you have an outcome, like describe, explain, right, analyze, whatever that might be, it doesn't say how, right? So a rubric is great because you can share that rubric with them ahead of time. I need to know that you can analyze these trends, that you can describe this, right? I don't care how you do it, just show me that you have this knowledge. So whether they want to write a paper, they want to do a presentation, do a video, right? Then the creativity can vary, but it's show me this. I just need to know that you learned this, right? Show me how, and however you want to show me is great, right? But this is what I need to know that you learned as a result of our time here together. So I think that's beautiful. It's great. Okay, so just a few reflection questions, and we kind of talked about this already, right? But what do we want students to be able to do as a result of our courses, our programs, their time here at Triton? How can students demonstrate that knowledge that the course or the program intended them to learn? And then how do we know that they're learning that, right? So this is really, again, it's deeply embedded in our teaching and our learning in the classroom, deeply embedded in the curriculum, the content that we give to our students, but great questions to consistently be reflecting on as practitioners. And then just a few reminders, right? Assessment is a perpetual work in progress. So you made some changes to an assignment or your course. You give students the ability to learn that information. You collect data. How are my students doing? Take a look. Oh, they're still a little bit low in this, right? I'm going to change something for next semester. And then the whole cycle starts all over again. So it's perpetual work in progress. It's never going to be 100% correct, right? But it's a way to inform our teaching practice to continually strive for improving student learning. And then the best assessments, improve your teaching and improve student learning. So we just have a few minutes left together. Do you guys have any questions for me? It's an exciting time to be talking about assessment here at Triton, just because there are so many things changing with that. So we've talked about it being a way of improving the quality of our instruction. So that's really going to be a focus for us for the next few semesters in building some of these processes. So it's an exciting time to get involved.